So welcome everybody. This is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices General SharePoint Development Special Interest Group, and this is the bi-weekly sync around the SharePoint development topics. So more on non-client-side development topics like SharePoint Framework. This is more around provisioning, CSOM, Azure running, solution architectures, and also the citizen developer stuff like column and view formatting. If you're more interested on a SharePoint Framework related topics, those are actually covered in the SharePoint Framework bi-weekly community call. So it's definitely up to you which of these you actually want to join. Today we're going to have a quick recap on the situations related on Pmp CSOM Core, Pmp PowerShell, and the latest modernization tooling. We actually have pretty awesome announcements and awesome updates related on that one, which we're going to talk about because Paolo is actually going to do a live demos on some of the engine improvements later on. But first, Chris is going to do a really cool demo around customizing flow panel with list formatting action parameters. So what does that mean in practice? He's going to show that one. And then the second demo today is from Paolo related on the updated engine capabilities, and with engine I mean the Tenant templating engine which the community has built to manage your Office 365 tenants. So not just SharePoint sites, not just SharePoint content, but also other stuff like Microsoft Teams structure. So using the new capabilities, you're able to create a one PnP file which actually defines, for example, 3 site collections and SPPKT files and custom themes in the tenant level and site designs and site scripts, but also Microsoft Teams structures and channels and tabs pointing back on the SharePoint. So you can actually really define a cool looking stamps which will be then applied to the tenant by using one single PowerShell command or code or using our provisioning tooling. Anyway, quickly, that's me already getting slightly ahead of the time on the discussion, so let me actually move on the slide. So quick reminder on the Teams, we actually want to go to the Microsoft Teams as soon as possible, as soon as Microsoft Teams supports presenter and attendee functionality, or alternatively external users being able to promote it as an attendee to presenter in the broadcasting capabilities. Right now these capabilities are not yet there, but we're evaluating this option to happen as soon as possible. So we do apologize that we're still on the Skype platform, but that's really the reason behind of that decision. Now, opportunities to participate with the community. So you are absolutely welcome. This community is all about us. It's not about individuals, not about individual persons. It's about us building something together. And how do we build something together? Is that we learn from each other. So you are more than welcome to demo a solution or a technical pattern in this community call. So basically being any of the people like me, Bert, Patrick, and then you will get your schedules. Contribute in a GitHub in the documentation or samples or solutions. There's multiple ways of contributing. For example, for documentation, it's nothing serious and nothing more than clicking an edit button on the page and then submitting a suggestion. And that's contributing. And the key point also is to provide feedback. If something isn't working as you think it should be, or you're frustrated on something, please let us know. We do want to help you. It's obviously we are limited on the resources what we are having, and we need to prioritize our time, but we definitely want to hear if we're going to improve any of the services or behavior or community functionalities or product functionalities from SharePoint engineering perspective as well. Cool. AKMS SP Dev Docs as the documentation location. AKMS SP Dev Videos is our video YouTube channel, and AKMS SP Dev Issues for issues in the development platform side. Now, a few kind of quick announcements before we go to the recap of things is that we have a new version available related on the provisioning service. And I'm going to actually do this in a way, I'm going to do actually a live demo on this one as an ad hoc demo before we move into the other topics. So give me 1 second. I'm going to actually show this one in practice. Now, like I said, the provisioning service has been updated, and I want to quickly show you what we did there because this is actually really cool stuff. So if you go to the provisioning SharePointPnP.com, this service is still in a beta status. We're looking into moving general availability relatively soon. But the whole point of this service is that you're able to provision example content to your tenant. So you can provision any of these templates, as many versions of these templates as needed with the different adaptions. One of the things what we saw when people were actually using this service service. Let me actually start a provisioning just to show this one in practice. So as an example, this is a cool looking site designed by our design team, and you can easily add this kind of a site to your tenant as long as you're a tenant administrator by signing in, authorizing, and then filling in the form for what URL do you actually want to use for that one. So let's actually do this in practice. So let's do workshop demo as the URL, and we are validating the URL. That doesn't take too long. So are we overriding existing site collection or not? In this case, it's a new site collection. Clicking provision, it's going to do validating of the prerequisites. And this is now the key thing what we changed within this morning's release of the provisioning service. And this one actually gives the capability of validating, are there any missing prerequisites like the app catalog or any permissions missing, and then it's instructing you to fix those issues. So what will get provisioned, I will click provision, and that actually starts provisioning process. The easiest way to actually know that provisioning is completed is actually really go to the URL, to the inbox of the email address which we used or which we provided in the form, and I'm going to go to the Outlook while we're waiting to that happen. Now, like I said, we changed the provisioning validation logic quickly. I'm going to show this one in practice as well. So now if I'm signed into my tenant as a tenant administrator, this is a separate tenant. So I'm going to just demonstrate this in practice. A slightly different tenant than the previous one. And if I go to the SharePoint provisioning tooling and my tenant isn't fulfilling or doesn't met with all of the prerequisites which are needed for the specific template. So many of these templates do not actually have prerequisites, except that you need to be a tenant administrator. But as an example, if you're using custom learning, you need to have an app catalog inside of your tenant so that the custom learning template can add the needed SharePoint framework solution to your tenant and activate that to be available. In past, the validation of these prerequisites happened actually after the provisioning has started, and that definitely wasn't optimal. So now we actually validate as part of the provisioning a request. So now if I authorize and authenticate against the application, there we go, and I'm filling the UI, so let's do something which is absolutely unique. So the URL is actually absolutely available within the tenant. And now if I click provision, it's validating prerequisites. And if something isn't met, we actually tell you the problem what you're having within your tenant. So as an example, in this case, there's an application catalog is missing. So you can follow up on that link and wait 30 minutes and try again. So after that, the provisioning will be completed. So this will definitely help on people reusing these templates as a demo content, reusing the template as a starting point potentially for something what they're building. And they are really there to help you to kind of visualize and see what's possible based on the modern SharePoint sites and modern SharePoint experiences. Really cool stuff. And we will be releasing a new set of templates as well, updated templates with header support and section background support in a few weeks. So updates are coming up all the time for the provisioning service. Now, as I was talking this, let's double check. Does Megan has already an email? That's 708. That is actually the email on the Contoso workshop site, which we just created using that alternative tenant, which was fine. So if I click that URL, we can actually see that my workshop demo site collection is created with an example content and an example structure and example demos, how you could actually build your modern SharePoint site. So pretty cool stuff. Maybe one thing to notice here is this is a good example from a template, that this one here in the original lookbook designs is actually a Power Apps form, and there's unfortunately no APIs yet, at least in the Power Apps side, so we would be able to use that. Right now this is an image, but it gives you the indication what it could be, and you can then easily further modify the site by using the normal UI and modify, for example, the navigation, or modify the header to align more based on your own designs or based on your own thinking of whatever you want it to be. But cool, that was the ad hoc demo. So let me actually stop sharing. There we go. So let me flip back on the slides and we move on within the content. I wasn't watching what's happening on the Iron window during my demo, unfortunately. But I'll follow up on those as we move along on the slides if there's any questions. Now, a few other things, kind of general points. which I wanted to pinpoint. The April 2019 numbers are out. We had 232,000 watch time minutes in YouTube, 42,000 views, 55,000 unique visitors in GitHub, 271 views, 1,170,000 views also in the Docs platform, and quite a few unique tenants using this capability. So there are a lot of usage on this open source tooling, open source engines inside of the community. And thank you for all of you for participating and helping on making all of this open source functionalities possible. And also the out-of-the-box functionalities possible, because your feedback is crucial for us as a Microsoft to provide you the capabilities. Now, maybe one thing just notice in the social media, I pushed out this one a few hours ago already. We do have now more than 10,000 unique subscribers, so 10,000 subscribers in the SharePoint Developer YouTube channel. And thank you for that, and great to see that there's value around those videos which are available. So there's SharePoint Dev training videos, tutorials, community call recordings, all of those are available from there. Thank you anyway for your interest, and please give us the feedback, more feedback in the future as well, related on what's needed. One thing, final thing, before we go to the open source project status, we are now open sourcing also our assets. So if you're interested in using these assets or the images anywhere, this is now available. Everything is now licensed under Creative Commons attribute, so Creative Commons license. So you're able to download, for example, the Parker Porcupine and build something out of it as well. Obviously, this is provided as under the CC license, so you can do whatever you want with this, basically with these assets. But we would ask that don't do anything super crazy. But you are more than free to use Parker the Porcupine as an example as part of your own presentations or assets or swag or whatever you're planning to do in the future. Everything is available now from github.com/pnp/media. So have fun with all of those assets. Good, and that's then all what I had before we go. Quick recap on the open source projects. So let's start with the Pmp CSOM Core library, and I think Bert, you'll be doing quick intros on this, or recap.
Yeah, I can do that.
Excellent.
Sure, if you can move to the next one.
Yep.
So let's see, for Pnp Sites Core, I think the biggest work we did, and actually that's something that Paolo will demo later on in this call, is around the new schema implementation. So improvements around client-side page handling, page template support, themes, site header, footer, etc. But as I said, Paolo will give like a nice demo of that one. There's also a new extension method to convert the root site collection to communication site. So that has been announced that you can kind of upgrade your, if you have an older template, then you have like a regular theme site as the root site collection. Folks want to have a nice communication site in there, and we finally have an upgrade method for that, essentially, that's available. And then there's like a whole list of smaller fixes in the theming area, client-side pages area, navigation, done by several people, so thanks for that. Great work, guys. Looking forward in progress, and maybe Paolo can correct me, but I think we still have some work to do on the Azure AD user side of the new schema. So that's coming as well. But overall, I think good progress this month, Vesa.
Yep, absolutely. And then let's move to the Pmp PowerShell. Now I didn't double check. Is Irving on the line?
Yeah, I can present.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm here.
Excellent.
So quite some changes here. A lot of them are actually a result of the changes in Core, which is typical as we follow Core very literally. One of the things that stand out here is that we now, through the navigation commandlets, you can manage the site footer. As you might be aware of, the site footer is part of the navigation node collection in SharePoint, but it's a bit hidden away. So we have these commandlets now that allow you to update the site footer very easily. We have a helper commandlet, PnP SharePoint or SB REST method, which basically takes care of all the authentication behind the scenes and the request digest and all that kind of things. You basically say, invoke this API, underscore API/web endpoint, for instance, and it will return the object that comes back from that. So it makes your lives a bit easier. Com side enablement on the root side if your tenant already supports that, so we can convert the root side to communication side. A couple of additions to the convert to PnP client side page commandlet there that help you make your life a bit easier. As we speak, it's not on this list yet, I am introducing a template parameter to the add PnP client side page, so you can save it as a template and reuse that page in your site. And pretty big change under the hood that is not listed in this yet, because I have to find a good way to describe it. But we now support a new way of authenticating against your tenant that will automatically retrieve the correct access token if you do graph calls. That's a long story, and there are quite some little requirements for you to be in place, that you have a certain app pre-trusted in your environment, but the result is that you can make calls to SharePoint and the graph at the same time without getting pop-ups and all kinds of things. So as said, that's in there already as of the next release, but I have to find a good way to describe it and explain is what you have to set up and how to get that to work. That's it.
That's it from PowerShell side. So let's move back on the bird on the modernization tooling. Quick updates on that side as well.
Yes. First of all, there is this video series that we created, like 6 short videos ranging between 5 to 50 minutes introducing page transformation. So if you're curious about what it is and want to get started, I think that's a really easy way to get up to speed. It also contains information about publishing portal transformation. So last time we released publishing page support in preview, and we've seen thousands of publishing pages being transformed already. So it's really taking up really good. Folks are using that and playing around with that. We did several improvements in the publishing page area, which in my view are enough to actually go GA with publishing page support. So the May version will officially have GA support for publishing pages. One of the things that we added there is URL rewriting. So if you do a cross-site transformation and your HTML contains URLs to other assets in your SharePoint site, we just rewrite URLs to the target site collection. So you get like the proper URLs. You can turn those things off, of course, but everything's configurable, but it's there. There's better support for page banner images, so that like if you post, let's say you modernize a page, you want to post as a news, then the news preview image is taken from the page, and now you can kind of configure that, which is handy for your publishing pages. Some improvements in web part, there should be web part title handling, and better table support as well. So table cell alignment, some bug fixes there. So overall, lots of good things in the space, lots of testing going on. Literally there are hundreds of tenants using page transformation, and we had 25,000 pages transformed over March and April, and I just looked at the stats today. For May, we already crossed 2,000 in 2 days, so it's kind of growing, more and more people are doing it, so I think keep testing it, keep giving feedback, and yeah, we keep on improving it.
Awesome, excellent. A really powerful tool for transforming from a classic experiences to the modern experiences, and you can do scripting of the transformation if needed and all of that, but really cool stuff. Now, let's move on things. So Chris Kent is next on the line for doing live demo related on list formatting tips. And I think, Chris, I'm guessing your demo will be the customizing the flow panel with list formatting action parameters, because I saw that blog post going live like 15 minutes before this call. So
what?
Yes. Yes. But yes.
All right. We ready?
All good. I hope we have horses again on the show.
Never. Done with horses. And that's not true at all. But all right, let's see. Let me know when you guys see all this screen stuff.
Loading.
And
here we go. Now we got it.
Okay. So Vesa season, that's really all that's important. Okay, so my name is Chris Kent. There's my Twitter tweets and the blog and all that stuff. All right, so let's jump in and let's talk about list formatting and the flow panel. So on our classic courses site, was it 2 weeks ago, we showed you some cool stuff here. I went over to our secret lab. All right, we took a look. We had this whole idea of live updates to list. We were accomplishing that with flows. So we hit the start button here. It launches this flow panel. you notice I've got this begin the experiment flow, right? And when I run that, you know, it kind of does behind the scenes, and it'll start things and update things. And everything's great, but in order to also make it more obvious, I actually created two separate flows, right? A second flow called halt the experiment, right? They really do the same thing, though. So wouldn't it be better if I had just one flow that did that, but I could provide some context for what action they're taking, right? So in the past, I've shown you, yeah, certainly you could change the button, you could change the style, you could change an icon, you could do all that conditionally, right? And you've got multiple flows, you could certainly launch those flows conditionally, and that's all great. But, you know, the horses, they're pretty sensitive, they're pretty user savvy. They know that when you do things like that, people don't know what flow necessarily is, and why should they care, right? They just want to know it does something. So let's come over here to the things list. I'm going to zoom that in so we can actually see it. All right. I mean, I used to work a long time ago. I did wastewater management, so that's sewage, right, and handling how all that happened. So I have completely different context when I think of the word flow than maybe some other people do, right? So how can we kind of take that out of here? You know, like right here, this run flow and run flow. Sure, I can see the name, but that's not very obvious what's happening. So let's take a look. All right. So luckily, we've got some samples for you. So this whole sample here that I'm going to show you that's already got this kind of setup, first thing I'm going to do is drag that over so we can actually see what we're working on. There we go. Right. So all of this is available in our samples repo. All right. So let me grab that. Let me paste that in here. Bam. All right. There you go. All right. So make sure you're checking these out. Again, we've got column samples. We have a number of them. We're around flows, right? So we've got the start flow. We've got a start flow conditionally. The ones I'm going to show you here are within the generic row actions, where we're showing you each of the row actions. We showed you this last week. All right, but we've updated this execute flow now to show you a couple other things here. So that's all this is. The main thing is this is a button that we've generated, right? And so we have this customer action that says what the button should do. The rest of this is just to make that pretty little rocket and the wording for deploy, okay? So in the past, we've shown you've got to include the ID here, all right? That's the ID of the flow. But now the team has introduced a couple of new fancy things, right? So now I can say, here, now this is escape JSON, so all my double quotes have to have that, you know, what is the backslash in front of it? So let's see, header text. All right, we'll do another one of those backslashes. We'll do another one. And I can say whatever I want. So do the things and stuff. So I can provide some real context here. So when I preview that, no! Well, we'll pretend that didn't happen. We'll try writing that again by cutting and pasting. Oh, I'm missing a colon. You're right. That's why I don't type in front of people. It's upsetting. All right, let's grab it. And so let's paste that in. So we'll take a look at what I missed. So this is exactly right. Thank you, Stephen. I missed that colon here. Okay. So now we preview that. And when I come over here, I'm going to press that deploy button. We'll see some fancy stuff instead of run flow. Oh yeah, do the things and stuff. Look at that. So now we can provide some real context for what's happening. All right, so you've got an approval flow. You can put that right up here. It's an awesome spot for that, and that's great, but I still got this run flow button down here to provide even more context. All right, so let's see if I can type this one. So now we come in here, we'll say bam, and we'll go bloop, bloop, and we're going to call this one, it's called run flow button text. Keep in mind these are case sensitive. Right? And there's my colon. Very good. All right, so this one I'm going to say laserfy. All right, so I really want to make sure they understand that they're deploying horse lasers here. Oh, all right. So when I click that now, check it. Come on now. Deploy horse lasers. Laserfy. So nothing's really changed in terms of functionality. But again, you can provide so much more context here to really help users understand what's going on. It really helps with user adoption. Right, so we've already taken the flow for a selected item out of that flow menu up top where it may not be discovered. Now we're putting it down there. We provide context with the name and a button directly on the list item. And providing it directly in that flow panel is really awesome. Now, a couple notes here. You can go crazy with length. All right, so if I grab this 6,000 characters, sure, why wouldn't I do that? All right, and I come in here and I change my header text to be 6,000 characters long. Can I do that? Yeah, you can. Don't do it, but you can. All right, so we'll try that. You can see it's taking a little bit of time here. All right, here's what happens. It just wraps and goes down forever. But there you go. but don't do it. Maybe keep it less than 2 lines, right? This is not a spot for your instructions. This is just a title, okay? So let's remove that. Let's undo that. That's craziness. All right, now you can do the same thing here. I will tell you, laserify the things that you do, right? That sounds great. So we're going to preview that. So when you do that with the button, you're not going to get quite the nice experience there. So you'll see the first thing it does is it wraps the button, not the text. So that looks terrible. And if you continue to go longer, it'll just eventually run off the side of this. So don't do that. All right? So keep it short. Anything about 12, I think, to 16 characters. I have that somewhere else. It all depends on how many capitals you're using, really. Okay. So there we go. That's it. That's a great way to really increase the stuff you can do. So I don't know what some said about the theme. Yeah, it's a little weird that the buttons in the flow panel are blue, but what are you going to do about it? All right, so let's come back over here. Now, there's a blog post that has the details. Oh, ignore that. All right. So here we go. So the actionParams. This is really only used for when you use the action execute flow. ID is always required. Header text and run flow button text are optional. You include one or the other. If you include header text, it's going to set that text at the top of the panel. It's even going to do it for that first run panel, right? So when you do that first time a user runs the flow, right, it's going to ask them to confirm connections and all that. It'll still use your text for the header text. So that's awesome. Makes that even less scary, because that can be a little scary and a little jarring for the first time when people are suddenly asked to authorize certain connections. Provide them some context. You can even do this stuff conditionally, right? So you can look at the list items itself, say maybe a due date's passed and you really want to emphasize that button and you want to put it in all caps. You can do that kind of thing. All right, so for the row flow button text, that's what it's called. Obviously, it's not going to show up in the first run panel, and you cannot customize the cancel button right now. All right. So that's it. Here's some resources for you. So check out the documentation. Again, if you check out this particular sample, the generic row actions, then you'll be able to see those things in action. You can cut and paste so you don't forget the colon like I did. Right? And then here's some additional posts. So this one is all about how you customize that flow panel. Here's how you conditionally set action parameters. And if you want to make a real easy way to do that flow, here's the format only kind of tip. All right, that's it for me. Thanks a lot.
Awesome, thank you, Chris. Great stuff as always. It's good to. It's going to be interesting to say when will you run out of ideas on this recurrent spot for bi-weekly, but we'll see. We'll see. It's a good challenge.
All right.
Cool. Thank you for that. Let me move back on the slides because we have a few slides before we move into the demo from Paolo. How's your audio?
Yes. Yep.
You are all
Hello, everybody.
Do you want me to be your lovely assistant with slides?
I'd love you to be my lovely assistant.
Sounds good. Excellent. So let's actually move into Paolo's demo. So Paolo is going to talk about the new tenant template capabilities and especially concentrating on Microsoft Teams structure capabilities. And let's definitely talk about what is the relationship of this one for the underlying Graph API. So there is a templating mechanism in Microsoft Teams Graph. Why are you implementing a new one? And I think Paolo is going to cover all of that in this one. But Paolo, let me move on to the next slide and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Vesa. Yes, so let's talk a little bit about the new functionality that we are going to introduce in the provisioning engine, which is the support for provisioning teams with the PnP provisioning engine. First of all, what are the options that we are going to provide? You can provision a new team still using a JSON template, so the one that you can use with Graph directly. And we think this is, or this can be useful whenever you already have a JSON template of a team that you want to provision in a unique context, in a unique solution using the provisioning engine. Moreover, if you prefer to define the whole provisioning template as an XML file, we added to the 2019-03 schema of PnP the functionality, the capability to define all of the settings and assets that you want to provision for a new team, including channels, tabs, custom apps, and stuff like that. You can clone an already existing team, creating a new one cloned from the existing one. Actually, this functionality is still under development, but is one of the easiest one, let me say, compared with the others at least. And you can teamify, I don't know if I can use this word or not, but you can teamify an already existing Office 365 group, so that if you have a group and you want to upgrade, let me say upgrade it to a team, you can use the provisioning engine, and of course you will be able to use some custom tokens to identify the already existing group and to upgrade that one into a team. What do we provision right now? We provision the whole team plus the channels, so you can create custom channels while provisioning the team, and custom tabs inside every channel. We have a quite open model, so right now we support all the predefined Teams app ID that you can use to create a custom team tab, and the same will be in the future if there will be any new team app ID available. You can even upload messages in a channel if you want, so that if you need to create, for example, a team with a channel and you want to provide a welcome message to the users or any preloaded messages, whether because you want to create a demo environment for your users or because you want to prepare a welcome message for them, you can do that using the provisioning engine. And you will be able, right now, this one is the other component that is still under development. You can add custom apps to the catalog of teams and make them available in a tab, in a channel of a team. So quite a rich set of functionalities. As Vesa said, yes, we have the JSON template available and the Graph API to create a team based on a JSON template. Why would someone want to have the same functionality through the PnP provisioning engine? Well, because using the provisioning engine, you can provision not only a team, but a whole set of assets and resources. So you can create one or more set collection in SharePoint Online within a unique hub site, for example. And you can, at the same time, within the same provisioning context, create a team and maybe show the content or some of the content coming out from those SharePoint Online sites into any of the team tabs that you have in the team that you are going to provision. So it will give you a more complete provisioning experience in the whole set of Microsoft 365 services, rather than having a provisioning engine which mainly targets SharePoint only resources, which is what we have right now, and which we'll have until almost next week when we will release the new May release of the engine. So I can switch on the next slide by myself, if you don't mind, Vesa, just to not ask you to be too much my lovely assistant. And how can you use these functionalities? Well, of course, as you can do nowadays with the other functionalities of the provisioning engine. So you can use .NET Framework and the PnP Site Core library. And in order to do that, you will need to adhere to some special requirements and use some new types that we introduced for the sake of having support for open authorization access tokens in doing the provisioning of a team. Or you can use PowerShell. And as Erwin told us a few minutes ago, there are some changes that happened under the cover of the authentication of Pmp PowerShell, again, for the sake of supporting not only the SharePoint authentication, but also the Azure Active Directory open authorization model, in order to be able to use the Microsoft Graph. Because, of course, under the cover, the provisioning of teams leverages the Microsoft Graph and most of the beta actions that are now available in the beta endpoint of the Microsoft Graph. So keep it in mind. We are still using some of the beta actions available in Graph. So let me share my screen. Let me switch to the demo environment so that we can see in practice what you can do right now with these functionalities. And please let me know when you will see my screen. So it should be loading pretty soon. Still loading.
Loading 3 dots.
Can you see it now?
No,
Not yet?
I will tell you when we get it. So trust me, Paul.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Now we got it. All good.
Wonderful. So this is the web UI of Microsoft Teams, and this is a demo tenant that we use in PnP. And right now we have just a couple of sample teams in this solution. Let's say that I want to provision some more teams in my environment. Here I have a PnP provisioning template, which is based on the 2019-03 schema, so the new and latest one, which will become the default one with the May release of the engine. And here in the new schema, we have a Teams section, a Teams element, which is a new one. And through this Teams element, we can define a set, so one or more or zero or more team template elements. This team template element represents a section which defines a team that will be created based on a JSON template. I know it's a bit of funny and weird to see some JSON instead of the XML or the other way around, but every now and then we need to do that. So here we have an XML element which defines that we want to create a team with some specific display name, description, and visibility, and based on a JSON template, which will be basically provided to the Microsoft Graph to create such a team. As you can see here, we have a display name as well as we have one here, and this one in the attributes of the XML will override what we eventually have in the JSON template, just to let you know. So right now, for my happiness, XML wins on JSON. Just a joke, okay? So from a team perspective, we also have the team element, which is the one which allows us to define fully through XML what is the configuration, what are the settings, and the parameters for creating a new team from scratch. And here again, we can provide the display name, the description, visibility, and whatever else. We can even archive an already existing team because we are going to support delta changes on these properties. So step by step, but we will be able to apply multiple times a provisioning template. And as we do with the SharePoint Online site, we will do with the team, and we will update and do the delta changes of the settings of any already existing team. We can provision settings for the fund settings, the guest, member, and messaging settings, as you can see. And we have all of the options that usually you find available in the UI of Teams when you go under the Manage Team section and you select Settings. All these items, which you will find here, will be available and are available in the XML as well. You can configure the security section through which you can define the owners and the members. And if you want, you can even clear all the existing ones and create new ones if you need it. You can define channels. And for every single channel, aside from the name and the description, you can define tabs. Every tab will have a name, a display name, a Teams app ID, which will define what will be the content of the tab. And for every single kind of Teams app ID, you will be able to configure all of the settings which are represented by those 4 attributes that you have: the entity ID, the content URL, website URL, and remove URL. Not all of them are mandatory. It depends on what you are provisioning, but in order to know what you can provide here, you need to use as a reference the graph documentation where you can find all of this information. And just to give you a pointer, if you go to graph.microsoft.com, under API reference, you select the beta endpoint, you go to the teamwork section, under apps, you have the add tab section, and there at the very end you have the configure built-in tab types. And in this page, you can find all of the Teams app IDs that you can use and all the settings that every single kind of Team app ID wants to have in order to be properly configured. So that said, let me try to apply this provisioning template onto a target. I will first of all execute the application and later on explain you a little bit how it works without too many details. So let me run this application, Ctrl F5. Okay, here is the application. It is a console application, and first of all, I will have to authenticate providing my work school account credentials. So I will target this tenant, and I will use this set of credentials. Let me type my password and sign in. Oops, and of course I need to write the right password. Okay, I'm in. If I go back to my web browser and I show you Teams, as you can see, the first team is popping up and the second one too. And pretty soon we will see also the channels popping up in the UI. And all of them will be configured accordingly to the settings that we have in the XML template. It's a matter of waiting a few seconds because it takes a while to do the whole provisioning, mainly because we have to wait for all of the resources to be ready Office 365 side, because whenever we create a team, we have to create a group, the team, the resources in Azure Active Directory, in Exchange Online, and SharePoint Online, so it takes a while. But right now, our console application is completely done, and we can close it. And here we have the team that we created using the JSON template, which is the first one, and the other one that I created using the XML syntax. And if I go to the channel that I just provisioned, you can see the welcome messages that I have in my XML template, as well as you can see that I have a few tabs, like a Bing tabs, a document library, which will show me the content of a document library that I have in SharePoint Online, and a wiki page. So, pretty useful and easy. In order to do that, from a code-based perspective, you have to create an object called PnP Provisioning Context, which is a new one. This object will be the one taking care of open authorization. So internally, we will simply use, for example, MSAL, ADIL, or whatever else technology you like in order to being able to get an access token for the micrograph. Once you create this object within a using context, you can simply do the provisioning as we are used to doing using the provisioning engine. So you get a reference to the tenant, or you get a reference to a specific web, and you do apply provisioning. In this scenario of a team, you have to target a tenant, because Teams is something which is at the same level of SharePoint Online and of a site collection of SharePoint Online, so you don't have to target a specific site, but you have to target the whole tenant that you have in Office 365. You use the apply provisioning hierarchy method, and you provide an object which is the in-memory representation of the XML template that we have in this file. Of course, not everybody is a developer, even if most of us most likely are developers. And regardless we are or we are not developers, usually being able to use PowerShell rather than always low-level code is something which is really good. So let me go back to my Teams environment and let me clean up what I just created. And let me do the provisioning one more time, but using PowerShell in this second demo. So here I am, I'm in PowerShell using the dev branch of PowerShell, as well as I am using the dev branch of Pmp CSOM Core right now, because this code is not yet released, just to be 100% clear. So I can connect to my Office Dev PnP environment, and I can even do that. So I have them side by side. Once I am connected, and I can simply apply a PnP tenant template, providing the same XML file as before, which is coming from the same folder as before. And by doing that, you will see that in a matter of few seconds, again, I will have my teams created in my Microsoft Team tenant. And here we are with the very first one, and pretty soon with the other one. And here it is. And again, under the cover of the PowerShell commandlet, we use exactly the same logic that I was using in my .NET sample application. I think that's it from a functionality perspective. I simply want to say also thank you to Laura Cochrane, who helped me developing the Teams object handler for the creation of teams based on a JSON template, and the whole community, generally speaking, because every single time we have a new functionality, it's because of the community and not just because of every single person contributed, but the whole community altogether. So I think that's it, Vesa. If there are any questions in the chat, I don't know, because I didn't follow them.
There's few questions on the chat. Irvin has been answering, I think, majority of them, more related on permissions required on a different scenarios. If we want to elaborate those permissions, we would have time for that one as well. The permissions are slightly, how would I put it? They don't always require, if you're using Pmp PowerShell, you don't have to be a tenant administrator always, but in this case, you need it to be. In your code, at least, we were doing operations in a tenant level, weren't we?
Yeah, the permission from a graph perspective, because under the cover we're using graph, are the group read-write all permission, as well as to get the users, we need also read user all, if I'm not wrong with the name of the permission. But yeah. Basically, you need to being able to read and write groups because it's a requirement to being able to create teams, and you need to be able to read the inventory of users to being able to add members or owners that you need to read first and then add as owners or members of the group. Yeah. That's it. So from this perspective, those are the only two permissions that we need from a Azure AD perspective. In the future, when there will be much more capabilities, maybe we will need more permissions.
Yep, absolutely. And really the key power here, maybe once again, just recapping on Simon's question as well, but was this a template? Yes, this was a tenant template, which now is supporting, starting from May, it's supporting JSON definitions for teams or XML definitions for teams. So you're able to then combine these settings to SharePoint site collection provisioning and all of the other provisioning elements, and then you can stamp, in quotes, you can always expect to get exactly the same end result when you're applying a template. The template itself can be a PnP template file or an XML file. In this case, it was an XML in XML format, but it could be also a PnP file, which inside of the PnP file contains an XML and assets like branding elements, and then you're able to apply those things to any tenant and get exactly the same end result. We're looking into extending the capabilities of the tenant templates as much as possible, depending obviously on the API surface, whatever the applications are offering. So right now, as an example, Flow and Power Apps are still having quite limited administrative APIs, so we can't really move to that direction yet, but we're looking into kind of combining everything into this tenant template thinking. So you're able to define your tenant scope solutions built with SharePoint, Teams, Power Apps, Flow, and whatever elements using a one file, and then apply that to a tenant, and you will get exactly the same end result. So really cool. And just
to make an example, maybe in the near future we will also have something new from a list of templates available on the provisioning service, which will provision not only sites but also teams. Why not? I mean, correct. Once we have the functionality, we can do whatever we want.
Yep, so. Absolutely. So right now the provisioning service, which I showed in the first demo, is mainly targeted for SharePoint lookbook sites, and then there's the custom learning scenario, but we'll extend those templates in the future as well. So really, really cool stuff. Good. There is a question. We're using your screen, Paolo. Let me actually go on the. Well, actually, let's use your screen if needed.
Oops, too late.
No, okay, fine. Let's go to the slides. So let me actually get the slides back on. No worries. Patrick is asking related on, given this is API, then implementation is language agnostic. Well, the JSON API for Teams creation is a graph API, and yes, that's a language agnostic. But if you're using Pmp PowerShell, if you're using the engine, those are still unfortunately limited on .NET or the .NET or the PowerShell. Now, and the reason for that one is that we're missing the .NET Core support yet on a native CSOM, which is, by the way, still planned to get, well, we're working on it, and in the best case scenario, we might have some announcements coming up in upcoming conferences. We haven't confirmed that scenario yet, and we're not going to take anything away from that announcement before it actually happens. But the CSOM Core support is needed for .NET Core support for the PowerShell and .NET Core support for the engine itself.
And I'm just wondering if the question was more about programming languages or languages like English, Italian, Finnish, and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, we do support tokens in the XML, so you can have whatever you want and resource strings and whatever else. If the question was more about languages from a UI culture perspective, I don't know.
Yeah. Sunny J is asking, can we associate content type to Teams channel document library using this template? Yes, because now what actually happens there, just to clarify, so the document library which you see in Teams is actually a SharePoint site document library. So there is a SharePoint site behind of the scenes, and technically you can associate a content type on the document library behind of the Teams channel. Now, should you do that? And for example, do require metadata and all of that, that's debatable. That's the separate discussion. Technically, yes. So that is absolutely doable. Any other questions which we might have missed? We do have 8 minutes. This is actually really cool. We have time for Q&A. Any plans for creating modern remote event receivers with simple REST endpoints? Need to some validation prior saving list item. The before saving is a problematic, so to say, because that would mean that we would have to halt server-side operation until somebody is responding back yes or no. And that's why the webhooks do not support the updating, which we're able to cancel the update, because we can't really. What would happen with that thread? We would shut down the thread being executed, and that's really the challenge around this canceling an update because of given a validation. Now, there might be certain scenarios which might be possible with the updated option, so you would be able to fall back on the previous version. It's not as optimal situation as it might be with an updating. Really, the key challenge of that one is really, to be honest, laws of physics, because we can't guarantee to call your endpoint fast enough, and then we don't want to stop our thread to be executed before you say yes or no. So challenging. Recordings will be available in your YouTube channel in 24 hours. Yes. JSON column formatting, view formatting, and multi-language. What's the story here? Good question from Yuan. Yuan has been asking a lot about multilingual questions, which is good, because let's actually talk about that one. So the multilingual, well, this kind of relates on the way we do development in SharePoint engineering as well, which is kind of this minimal viable product way. And what it means is that we want to get the functionality first out, and then we evolve the functionality based on the feedback what we're getting. And quite often the initial functionality is not multilingually supported, and that's just because we want to get the feedback first out, and then we start implementing the multilingual support. That's, as an example, that's now, I think yesterday we announced in Pacific timeframe that the multilingual support for modern pages are coming. So you're able to do in-place translation or multilingual support for modern pages. For column and view formatting, I know that it's in the pipeline. I do not know what's the timeline for that one right now.
There is one question from Fred about any restriction on how many teams can be provisioned at a time. Actually, we do not parallelize the provisioning, so we do them one by one, and as long as you have time to wait for, I think there are no limits. At least the limit is the number of teams that a single user can be an owner of. That's the real limit.
Yeah.
Because we work, and this is an important thing, I think, we use a delegated access token. So we create the team and all the stuff with a delegated access token, not with an app-only token. So there are the restrictions of the maximum number of teams that every single user can be an owner of. Keep that in mind.
Yep. Absolutely. Now I'm looking into trying to keep up with the questions. This is good. A lot of questions. Mo Anwar is asking, is there a way to apply PnP templates used in a provisioning side directly to a root sign of a tenant? And answer is actually yes, but not using the provisioning service. So you can actually access all of the provisioning service templates, which are absolutely open source as well. They are available in a GitHub, so you can download the PnP files from there, and then you would be using PowerShell to apply any of these to the root side of your tenant. Now, if your root side of a tenant hasn't been transformed to be a communication site, and then you try to apply a communication site template on top of it, you might actually run into an exception, which is related on the layout canvas supported, the layout types being supported or not. So we do recommend people moving in the communication site template first, and then is it Comify, and then applying those templates if needed. Dean is getting permissions issues related on SharePoint API management page on the SharePoint Online admin page. I'm a SharePoint admin. What role do I need to have? Most likely, unfortunately, that requires actually tenant administrator permissions because behind of that ASPX page is actually operations towards the Azure AD. And you're basically managing the Azure AD application and API permissions. So SharePoint Online admin permissions are unfortunately not sufficient. And this kind of relates on the discussion on the SharePoint Online admin permission in general, because in Azure AD, unfortunately, and this is a let's say, thinking maybe on Microsoft's side, or absolutely it's our fault, like quite often it is, there is a full level permissions, which is tenant permission, and then there's a smaller level of permissions, but there is no such permission level called SharePoint admin permission, so you can't actually target those kind of permissions. So that's behind of the scenes what's causing this challenge. Any updates on supporting the modern web services? Answer is no, we're not going to support them. We might actually provide a Graph API for them. That's a separate discussion, but definitely an ad hoc no services not planned to be supported as such, unfortunately. Relates on the minimal viable product discussion as well, unfortunately. And thank you, Dean, for note. I will actually, yes, so my team is actually owning the admin API in SharePoint Online admin tenant, so let me add that one in the task list of my team. Good. Any updates on taxonomy REST APIs? Not at this moment. We might have some announcements related on taxonomy capabilities in SPC, but I can't comment on anything around that. They're being worked on. That's the latest official status on it. Will there be? Is there a way to template general channel settings? Anyone can post message. Only owners can post message using Graph API or Teams JSON templates. I think the Graph API is trying to follow up on Teams. Graph API is definitely trying to follow up on all of the settings which are available in the UI of Teams. So if there are settings within the UI which are not yet available in Graph, you can expect those to be there sooner or later. So that should be fine. Thank you, by the way, Dean, on the exception message. I've noted that in my endless to-do list, but I'll delegate that forward. .NET Core support, kind of touched that quickly already earlier. It is still in pipeline, coming sooner or later. I can't actually comment on the exact timeline. Being worked on, absolutely. We do understand the importance of that one as well. And now I'm looking at the time. We're hitting 8 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. on my time. So let's actually start closing on things. On the web services, the Graph, yes, Judith, that's always a good idea to, on the requests of new features and new functionalities, getting a user voices is definitely the right way to do. That will cause multiple pair of eyes watching those requests which are in user voice. So thank you for pointing that out. I should have actually mentioned that when I was answering your question. But I think that's it for this one. So thank you, Chris, for the great demo. Always good to see where the horses, what the horses are doing next. Thank you, Paolo, for the great demo around the tenant templating improvements on the team side. And thank you, everybody, for really great discussion once again. I do apologize if we missed some of the questions. It's always hard to keep up with all of the questions. This time we did have sufficient time for Q&A. And I think everybody likes that there is a time for Q&A because it helps on answering those questions openly. Thank you for this one. Video will be in the YouTube channel within 24 hours, like always. So thank you, everybody. Have a great Thursday and Friday and weekend. And if you're in Build next week, see you there. Drop by in our booth. Thank you. Bye-bye.